Oh, hey, bro. I see you getting your work in a Heights ticket, eh? And getting most of your training paid for by CSQ. Later, bro.
So my name is Jason Wright. As Jenny said, I'm from Construction Skills Queensland. Tough act to follow, thanks Jazz. Yeah, great presentation, and really want to have a chat to you about where you're going within your space and what we can do to help. Excuse me. So I am a plumber by trade. I didn't have to do a stint in the Portaloo before going into this role, which is great, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight as to what we do as an organisation, and I'll elaborate from that as we go. Also wanted to just thank RDA and Local Jobs for having me here. It's a privilege to speak to you guys and share a little bit of the knowledge that we've got around the industry and what we do, and where we're going to hopefully change the space for employment in the construction industry. I just want to ask, I know we've all done a little bit of exercise earlier today, but excuse me, who's heard of CSQ? Wow, that's amazing, because I can tell you now in my role as an engagement manager and getting out on site, the number of people in the construction industry that haven't heard of us is really mind-blowing. And when I've worked around apprenticeships and employment and training for as long as I have, it's a worrying thought that people in the construction industry don't actually know we exist, and yet I've got that many people in this room that do know about us. So Construction Skills Queensland, we're an independent, not-for-profit, industry-funded body. So for every job in Queensland, over $150,000, there's a training levy charged, and some of that percentage goes off to portable long service and QLD, and the rest comes back to us in the training fund, which is what I'll run you through today. So we're here to build the pipeline of skilled workers in Queensland. So there's a few things that I'll touch on throughout the presentation as to how we're looking at doing that and what that involves, and how we're looking at doing it. So what we do with the funds that we get from every job in Queensland goes back out to what we call our training plan. It's or commonly called a course guide, and this gets launched around August, September each year, and does change based on our consultation. So my presentation today will give you an insight into what we do at our consultation with industry and how that influences our training plan, and then when we roll that out. So there's over 200 short courses on here that are funded by Construction Skills Queensland for those that work in the construction industry, and I'll again elaborate on that as to how you guys can influence certainly our youth to go into that pathway. I've got plenty of these and plenty of business cards and a few other things down there, so if you're interested in anything that isn't covered today, please come over and have a chat. I'd love to share that with you. So as I said, we're funded by a levy on anything over $150,000 in Queensland, and that's obviously what we then put back out to the industry. I've got another short video. I just want to, hopefully this one will work as well. So we do a lot of research and data gathering from the industry as well as to what the next, and I'm going to go as far as 10 to 15 years looks like within the construction sector. It is a sector that is still experiencing significant growth, and where we see it will change in the next 15 years and what sort of things will. So I'm just going to let Rob have the floor here for a second, if we can get this one working as well.
Hi there, Rob Sabira here, Director of Research and Data with Construction Skills Queensland, with a quick update for you on what's happening in the industry. Now, we all know about the housing boom. Ultra-low interest rates and government stimulus checks have driven new housing approvals up the steepest and tallest curve in the history of Queensland building. Now, that was the very definition of a one-off sugar hit. It doesn't mean there'll be a crash this year, but there certainly will be far fewer contracts being signed. 2022 is going to be the year of building out all those contracts that were signed last year, and that should all be done and dusted by around early 2023. Looking forward, we see major projects rather than residential construction being the big driver of construction activity. We're tracking over 6,000 projects across Queensland, valued at $85 billion. These are either committed or planned to be delivered over the coming years. Now, that pipeline is twice the size of what it was just a few years ago. This is being driven by record government expenditure on roads and railways and other infrastructure, as well as a rapidly growing list of renewables projects that are popping up around Queensland. Now, renewables really are an emerging key driver of construction activity for the coming decades, and it's one sector that we at CSQ are watching really, really closely. Now, against this backdrop of sort of forward demand for major projects, it's a good thing the pandemic also delivered an apprenticeship boom. As you can see from this chart, it was quite the boom. There are now well over 20,000 construction apprentices in training across Queensland. This really is unprecedented. We've never had a number quite this high. This will ensure we have a healthy supply of tradespeople to meet the future needs of industry. Thanks for your time.
20,000 apprentices sounds a lot, doesn't it? Sounds an incredible number. Is it enough? Definitely not. And that's where we're looking at really making construction sexy again. And part of the role that you guys can play in schools and in the employment services space is steering people into a construction career. And that's what we're aiming to create, and I'm going to elaborate on that a bit today. Thanks, Rob. So back in March, we conducted what we call our regional consultation, and we go right around the state with that consultation. It's where we meet with industry and we meet with stakeholders, and we have specific focus group sessions where we discuss particular topics as to where the construction industry is going. So we hold our industry partner and stakeholders sessions separately, because then we feel we get best engagement out of those. And sometimes an employer is not willing to open up and elaborate if they've got other industry organisations there, other stakeholders there that could influence what work they might be getting down the track. And that structure's worked well for us, so we're going to continue to do that. And that'll be every March that we conduct that consultation. So where did we go? What did we do? Like I said, we went right around the state. So Mackay, Townsville, Cairns, Bundaberg, Hervey Bay, Gladstone, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, Gold Coast, and obviously Toowoomba. And like I said, as part of those sessions, we had specific conversations with organisations, and some great photos there. Some of the people who are in the room, they're in that photo, so thank you for coming along. And we conducted those face-to-face group sessions where we could gather that content back to create our going forwards. So we had over 100 industry stakeholders attend those sessions. It's a two-way conversation where we're not just about what we're trying to do, we're trying to get that information back from industry as well, so we can create that pathway for future apprentices. I'm going to touch on some of the findings out of that a little bit later on, and it's not directed at any people in the room. I have made it generalised because this is right around the state that we got that feedback. And we encourage that from everybody that attends any of our sessions, forums, meetings, or simply picking up the phone and having a chat to me, or seeing you out on site at some stage. So as Rob said, we've got a healthy number of apprentices engaged in construction in Queensland. However, what we're seeing in those major projects that are coming on board in the future is 20,000 number needs to grow significantly. And that forward book, as Rob said, is we're seeing the residential stuff start to taper off. So we had a lot of that first homeowner grant building happen late last year and early into this year. So we're anticipating that that is going to drop off. But where we will see that increase will be through that major commercial stuff. And we know there's a lot happening around here in that space. The John Holland project down at Gatton has already been mentioned. And then we know about what's happening out at Wellcamp, and also things like of Inland Rail. So part of where I sit within the local jobs committee is having those conversations at that table, but also with people like Jaden from Tisby. And we're constantly meeting with organisations like that to make sure that we are on top of what's going on going forward. The other thing that we know is going to continue will be wage subsidies for apprentices. And that's obviously going to assist in influencing those future completions. What we're trying to get away from is that massive intake of apprentices and then the drop-off only a few months into their apprenticeship. So what we're aiming to achieve is that whole career pathway that apprentice can see where that will take them, that it might end up as a university degree after 10 or 15 years of being in the trade. War for talent, I think that's been spoken about significantly this morning, and the other word that I scribbled down was a conduit, and we see ourselves as a conduit as well, and linking organisations to each other where we don't necessarily have to do that work, but we can connect two people that are at a table that might not know what exists in that construction industry, and what funding and what training and what courses are available for those people. So Rob's already touched on the fact that post-pandemic, we'll see that flat line of that construction residential work. Vacancies do continue to rise though. We did see through the pandemic that residential approvals went up 209% in Toowoomba. So again, there's a lot of work happening, and that will slow down, but that commercial work is going to come in behind fairly quickly. So vacancies are rising, particularly in carpentry, plastering and tiling. And we've seen job ads for those trades triple in the last 12 months. So again, a lot of demand out there for roles in that part of the industry.
Sorry, just ask for those three again. What was that?
Carpentry, plastering and tiling. Yeah. So residential book still continues to be that driver, but we will see that taper off a little bit at the back end of this year. And then obviously significant weather events just lately have created another side to the industry. That will only be a very small percentage of the work that gets done, but again, there's going to be a requirement for attracting participants into that side of the industry. We will, as they start to unfold, and towards the back end of the year, when we release the 2022-23 training plan, again, identify some of the major projects that will be coming on. You can jump onto our website now and see what is currently committed or planned. And it's right around the Darling Downs down to the McIntyre Wind Farm, sort of west of Warwick, right out through the Surat Basin, through Chinchilla, Roma. So again, significant infrastructure projects happening. So again, what we're looking at is creating that pathway, and how do we attract suitable candidates into the industry, and what sort of does that look like for them? So we, like I've said a lot, we speak with stakeholders in industry that are unaware that each other exist and what is happening, and who's got pools of money to access to train these potential apprentices. So we're setting up what we'll call a RIG, and I'm going to touch on that towards the end of the presentation. And that's a regional industry group, along with a couple of other things that we're working in conjunction with Jayden. What we found out of our consultation, I want to stress this is some, not all schools, but some of the school coordinators and guidance officers are a little bit out of step with what goes on in construction. And I understand that. That's not your main role. You're not working in a trade role every day. So we're having to identify that now and start to make those connections as well, to give that information to the schools and provide that pathway for those that are interested in a trade. So when we get to the journey, I'll elaborate on where we see that sort of eventuating for people through into university. School work experience programs, as we understand, are not like they used to be, particularly when I came through school and went into my trade. So work experience might not happen as commonly. We understand that there's issues around insurances on job sites and risks associated to that. So we're trying to work now with the schools as to how we overcome that and what sorts of things CSQ can provide to provide experience and so forth. And same with the job service providers. We just haven't had that contact where we need to now provide you with that information. So again, you know what courses exist and what programs exist from a pre-employment perspective. And that's that disconnect as to what we do. Does anybody know what programs we offer and that we do have pre-employment programs? A few nods, a few hands up, which again is part of that problem. So my role will be to get out and have those conversations and share that with you. And a lot of agencies, we all know that there's funding available, but how do we connect you with that funding, or how do you find out about that funding if you don't know that exists? So we're going to try to create that collaboration, again, between the industry and the stakeholders. A couple of other notable issues that we found. Certainly around the knowledge of trainers in the training system. I've been through that space where I've worked in an RTO, I've been a trainer, finished my apprenticeship, worked on the tools for a little while, and at that stage, early 90s, mid 90s, work was a little bit up and down in the construction sector. So I had this vision that I'm going to go and work in a training provider, which was part of why I did my trade, was to try and then impart some of my knowledge back to people that are coming through and sort of passing it forward. What we discovered though is there's a lot of trainers in training providers that have been there for a long time. Their experience with what goes on in a trade has changed. Our current apprenticeship model might have been relevant some time ago. It might not be current today. And the trainers are still training in that fashion. So we're looking at how do we get that in our training providers, we've got trainers that are of a standard in industry that the industry accepts, that an apprentice comes out of college knowing what they should know. They've made connections with other apprentices, so the word is spreading around the region, and they've learnt from each other, because there was a lot of work in my trade that on a daily basis we just didn't do. So I'm completing a qualification with work that was not always something I did on a daily basis. So we're looking at a couple of things there. And a lot of red tape around the school kids in work experience, and probably our biggest issue in the regional areas is accommodation and transport. Again, we talk about the John Holland project at Gatton, and it's not an easy site to get to if you don't have a car and licence, which is a major factor in the industry as well, with apprentices being able to get around. So looking at how do we provide that for any of our skilled and unskilled labour to get around the region and get to different jobs. So this is looking a little bit about where Rob was talking with what we saw before the pandemic and since. And on the graph closest to me is showing those residential approvals are starting to taper down, and where we will see them finish up sort of through 2023. And then the graph furthest away shows that commercial pipeline and what it's looking like for major jobs. So what I'll get through is some of the training that would be relevant to moving from that residential space into a commercial space going forward. So that's the recap from our consultation. So we'll go back there. What's next is our rigs, so our regional industry group. So we've started forming those, and there's a few people in the room that I've already reached out to, and we're hoping that we will get those rigs sort of happening mid-June at this stage. They were expected to take off about this week or next week, but given that we've been inundated with presentations through master builders today and then master plumbers next week and QBCC events, there's a lot going on in the industry. It's the month for presentations basically. So we're actually going to move to our rigs in sort of June, and what those regional industry groups will be 10 to 12 industry and stakeholder representatives. We'll meet quarterly, so we're looking at sort of March as part of our consultation, around June, August when we launch our new training plan, and then again in November, where we'll have those discussions about what can we do to overcome the barriers that we're facing, and be that conduit that drives the positive training and industry pathway opportunities by connecting stakeholders and industries with solution-based focus is what our word is. Behind our rigs, we've got what we call our hubs. So we're trying to get away from acronyms, because that's the thing that we do in the training and employment industries, and we have acronyms for everything. And we're engaging more with the schools on that space. So we drive what we call our construction industry gateway insights. And that's where we have schools on an MOU where we will take them out and do teacher professional development. We'll take the students to a job site where they'll actually see what goes on the other side of the fence, and really get a feel for what a career in the construction industry will be. So right now, we find that kids will walk past a construction site, they can't see through the fence because we have all the great barricading up, and think that's a great idea. They come to an organisation like us and say, I want to be an apprentice, I want to be a carpenter. And you go, great, what does a carpenter do? Well, they lay carpet. And that's the barrier we've got, that, again, people coming into the industry don't understand that it's hard work, it's hot, it's sweaty. In the summertime, it's 40 plus degrees. You know, this time of year in Toowoomba, it's cold, it's hard to get out of bed. And I can remember moving, I lived down at Warwick. My first job was to re-roof a house at Pozieres near Stanthorpe, and it was about March, April, and I'd moved from Mackay. So how did you think that felt? I was going to work with, I think, 4 shirts, 3 jumpers, and I was still cold. So it's about educating apprentices that it's not always going to be easy in a workplace. There's going to be hot days, there's going to be cold days, there's going to be hard work. And you know what? As a first-year apprentice, you're not going to be the one on the ground directing everybody else around and what tasks will get done. You're going to be the one doing some of that hard work in the dirt and the mud, and potentially, well, probably don't dig trenches too much these days, but shovel was my first love, I think, back in my early teens. Spent a lot of time with it, crowbar shovels, digging trenches and those sort of things. So it's trying to educate entrants into the industry as to what that looks like. So what does a career in construction look like? So we fund a lot of different pre-employment programs, as I said. So it could be something as simple as a white card, so prepare to work in the construction industry, and that can be done obviously through most training providers. And I say most because not every RTA will have a contract with us to deliver training under our funding. And that's hopefully to get somebody into their apprenticeship, whether that be carpentry, plumbing, electrical, certainly whichever trade they're interested in. And then we're looking at making sure that they've got the skills to stay safe on a construction site. So simple things like silica general awareness training. Again, the materials they're cutting and what impact that's going to have on their health, not only today, but in future. And again, as a child from the 70s, I saw that with the James Hardie situation and asbestosis. And I was only young, but it's something that I still remember, and certainly we don't want to put apprentices in that space these days. And then other training that can wrap around that. So things like a boom type work platform or working safely at heights. So you might ask, and good question, we don't cap the number of short courses that an apprentice can do. Like I said, there's 200 on that page. And my general conversation with anybody in a trade is 8 to 9. It's not capped by dollar value, so they can look at the most expensive and do those first. And then the amount of money that we've got to spend, it might blow a few of you away, but in our general pool, we've got $49 million to spend on short course and qualifications with people working in the industry. So again, don't look at these courses and go, I better only do one because I'm starting to spend too much money. It's in the bank account, and we've shared that with some of the training providers already. So again, we want to have that money utilised. So once we get to sort of midway through their apprenticeship, so sort of start of third year is generally when an apprentice would start to look about what they're doing post their apprenticeship and their role as a tradesperson. We've got other courses and qualifications where we're starting to try and push them into at that stage. So things like establishing legal and risk management requirements within a small business. And for those that want to go out and have their QBCC licence, that unit becomes a requirement. So they can start that whilst they're an apprentice and start to look at their post-apprenticeship career. Obviously, there's a couple of other things in there around managing finances and administration, contracts and those sort of things, which are obviously a part of the construction sector. What we're trying to push is that if I want to be a carpenter at school and I go into my apprenticeship, that there's so many pathways that can be created out of that. Whether it be project management, whether it be teaching in a training provider's facility, it could be into a supervisory role on a major site, to working with local governments in contract administration and major organisations. So we've got a range of Certificate 4 and diploma qualifications as well that can be accessed. It's about letting the apprentices know that can be their pathway. So whilst they may not go to university straight from school, 4-year apprenticeship, maybe another 5 or 6 years on the tools, gathering some of these qualifications, and then looking at that university entrance, like I said, after 10, potentially 15 years. So we're trying to encourage that, to make that career pathway sexy and having young men and women enter the trade. So it's really easy. Again, on the course guide, and feel free to come and grab these, as I said. On the back of it, there's a QR code. This will take you literally a minute on your phone to do, and you can scan that QR code. It will take you to our website, and it brings this document up electronically where you can go through the document and find the course, or you can type it in if you know the name of it. It then brings a descriptor up about that particular course, and halfway down the page we've got a tab where you can click on and find an RTA that is contracted to us to deliver it. And then you simply ring up and engage with that RTA, enrol, and they've got their processes to go through that they'll ask that information from you. So pretty simple process. Like I said, there could be multiple courses, so it's worth having a look at it for the apprentice and starting to develop that training pathway and steering them down their future career. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time and the invite to be here today. I'm sticking around. I've got to take off around lunchtime, but I'll be here for a little while. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to come and ask and grab some of the course guides and a business card. Thanks, guys.